Chair recognizes Senator from 31st.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate agree to the House amendment to the Senate substitute to House Bill 60 as amended by the Senate.
Read the caption.
House Bill 60 by Representative Holt and the 112th. A bill to entitled enactment, Part 3 of Article 4, Chapter 11, Title 16 of the OCGA relating to carrying and possession of firearms that provide for exemption of certain laws regarding the carrying and possession of firearms for retired judges. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes Senator from 31st to speak to his motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, I bring to you House Bill 60. If you'll recall, House Bill 60 passed out of this body by substitute a few days ago, and it expanded the list of judges that were permitted to carry firearms. When this bill went back to the House, they amended onto it essentially the language from House Bill 875. Those of you who've been keeping up with the goings-on down here know that that is the, quote, gun bill. What they didn't put on, and what we've had trouble doing in the past, is getting the House to agree to the Senate's position on suppressors. So what you have before you is AM 28-1357, which is the amendment that adds the use of suppressors back to the other gun language that was a part of HB 875. And essentially what that says is that you can use a legally owned suppressor on a legally owned firearm to carry out legal hunting functions. There's nothing in the world that would keep somebody who chooses to violate the law with those suppressors or firearms today from doing that. They would be in violation of the law today, and they'd be in violation of the law once this is passed, but this would allow the legal use of suppressors. Then there's an amendment 410066, which amends my amendment dealing with suppressors. And what this does, folks, is it allows, I'll let the author speak to his amendment. I don't have opposition to the amendment. It's getting late. I'll be glad to go through and spend all the time you want to spend talking about a gun bill. We've had a lot of discussion about that. I know it's been in the media. It's been out of the House for a long time. Mr. President, I'll be glad to yield the well or take some questions that you're choosing.
Let me let you take a couple questions. Chair recognizes Senator 39th for a question.
Senator Yield.
Absolutely.
I'm looking on page 2, section 1-3, line 60 through 63. Do you see where I am?
Yes, sir.
Doesn't that section in effect expands what is commonly called stand your ground law by virtue of allowing people to use stand your ground in a carrying and possession of firearms. That is to say, one can use stand your ground for carrying a pistol without a license, for example. Was that your intent? That is to expand stand your ground, because if you look as well on page, why don't you go ahead and answer that question, and I'll refer to other areas of concern in a minute. But does that not expand stand your ground to such areas as allowing people who are carrying without a license, which would otherwise be a violation of the law, to allow stand your ground in that instance and in other instances?
Senator, let me point out that what this says is that you should, it lists about 4 code sections there, and it says shall be immune from criminal prosecution, therefore, unless in the use of deadly force such person utilizes a weapon, the carrying or possession of which is unlawful. It doesn't make anything lawful that is unlawful.
Will the senator further yield?
Yes, sir.
I beg to differ because it eliminates Part 3 of Article 4 of Chapter 11, which includes, but is not limited to, carrying a pistol without a license. That is to say that you can use the no duty to retreat law or the stand your ground law, even if you're violating the law by carrying a pistol without a license. This is it not, therefore, an expansion of the stand your ground law at a time when we are looking very closely at that law, its application and its use. By eliminating Part 3 in that section, it is in fact one of 3 areas in this bill which expands stand your ground in this bill. Is that not true?
Senator, I know that you have been very consistently passionate about the stand your ground law.
Yes, sir, I have. And
I don't agree with you that it expands it, but I know that you believe that in your heart. And why that you have an issue with a person being able to defend their family or themselves concerns me, but I respect your...
Well, if the senator will yield.
Certainly.
Isn't it true that this is not a matter of what I believe or what I don't believe? It's a matter of what this bill does and how it changes the law, expands stand your ground. You're right, I'm very passionate, although I disagree with you when you imply directly or indirectly that I in any way do not want someone to be able to defend themselves, their family, or their home. That's not true. But it is not a matter of what I believe or what I'm passionate about. It's about what is in this bill. And I'll be very honest with you, the reading that I have and the reading that other people have is that this is just one section out of 3 in the bill that expands stand your ground and allows people who are breaking the law to be exempt from prosecution if they are in fact using a stand your ground defense. I think that's a defect, but I'll speak to that if I get a chance to go to the well. I know we have been in the posture this 39th day of preventing debate and discussion, but I appreciate your forbearance. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely.
Chair recognizes Senator 26 for a question.
Senator Yield,
Absolutely.
let me ask you a question. Prior to all of this, hasn't it been true that if you didn't have a criminal record, you could go buy a pistol and you swear to an affidavit, and by law you could carry that pistol in your console or in the glove box or even in the trunk of your car?
With a license?
No. If you were legal, you had no felonies, you could purchase a gun and you could say, well, I want to buy one for personal protection. Doesn't make any difference. Take that pistol or long gun, but usually long gun wasn't the problem. It's always been the pistol. You could put it in your console. You know, a lot of cars now have a console in the middle rather than just your glove compartment. And I remember us changing that law because they had the glove compartment, but then somebody got stopped and locked up because they had it in the console, so we changed the law for that. But isn't it true, you didn't have to have a pistol permit. As long as you didn't have a felony, you could carry a gun, you just couldn't carry it outside in a business or those kind of things. Isn't that true?
I believe that's correct.
Under this, as I read, and I want you to just tell me whether or not I'm correct, that you can go into a nightclub with a loaded firearm with a pistol permit.
Senator, today, You can go anywhere you want to go as long as somebody don't stop you. That don't mean you're legal.
No. With Senator Yield.
Yes, sir.
With a pistol permit.
With a pistol permit?
With a pistol permit, you can go into a nightclub now. If the bar owner doesn't have no weapons allowed, isn't it true that if they have a sign that says no weapons allowed, then you're not allowed to bring a weapon, a pistol, into that establishment by law?
I believe that to be correct.
Under this bill, if this bill passes and you have a pistol permit, which means you're legal, that the bar cannot tell you can't come in there.
That's correct.
All right.
Chair recognizes Senator 23rd for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will Speaker yield?
The speaker?
I mean,
I'm just a plain old senator,
senator.
but I yield to you, brother.
Person in the well. Looking on line 362, do you see the language that's struck there from one of the things that would normally require a waiting period to get a permit? It's on line 362.
Yes, sir.
Why is that there? Why are we taking out a conviction of illegally pointing a firearm from the 3-year waiting period to get a permit?
Senator, I'm not certain of the language for 1611-102, but I will tell you that there are a lot of times with a firearm that it gets pointed at another person. Now, I don't recommend that, but that happens. You from the bird dog capital of the world. I know you've got to have been out there bird hunting and had your buddy turn around and swing the gun barrel past you.
Well, with the Speaker for the Senator.
Yes, sir.
I've never known anybody to be convicted of illegally pointing a firearm for some inadvertent act like that. What about domestic violence convictions? Do you think someone convicted of domestic violence ought to be able to go right out and get a firearm permit?
I'm really struggling to hear you, and I'm doing the best I can.
Do you think that someone who has been convicted of domestic violence should be permitted without a waiting period to go get a firearm permit?
I would say that would have a lot to do with additional other actions other than just simply that conviction. Those, and I'm sure you as a lawyer have dealt with those. Those are always ugly situations, domestic violence situations.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Senator 36 for a question. 36.
36.
Did you wish to ask a question?
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield.
Absolutely.
I was trying to follow the line of questioning of the senator who just spoke, who was just recognized to raise a question. And is it true that is it line 60-63 that a felon it would result in a felon in possession of a firearm being immune from criminal prosecution?
I'm sorry. On which lines?
60 through 63, and this is in the bill as it came back to us from the
Right.
House.
Are you referring to the same language as the senator from the 39th was asking about?
That I was trying to follow his line of questioning. Was that where he was referring to?
That was where his first questions were from.
That's right. So a felon in possession of a firearm is immune with this language. Is that right?
No. A felon who has lost his right to keep and bear arms has lost his right to keep and bear arms, and he is guilty of that regardless of what this says.
Well, how do you describe a person who used threats or force in accordance with Code Section 16, 321, 323, those 4 code sections, is immune from prosecution?
I believe that this language is dealing with the fact that you may use a gun to defend yourself. You may even be in possession of it in a unlawful place. But if you use that to defend your family or yourself, that you're not going to be guilty of having used that weapon in the wrong place. You have used that for a greater good, defending your own life or perhaps that of your children or family. That's the purpose for that language.
Well, thank you for that response. I'm just there's a lot to absorb here in what came back from the Senate, and then understand the impact of your amendment.
You have to be.
And if we passed your amendment, this whole thing would become law, wouldn't it? If we agreed with your amendment, then we'd be closed down. This would be the gun bill that Georgia's saddled with. Is that right?
I wish it were that way. There's actually another legislative body over on the other side of the Capitol, and they don't always see things the same way that we do. And
that's right.
we both have to vote yes on the same language.
But yeah, if they accepted.
Yes, ma'am. That's the process of the legislature.
That's right. So we're in a posture here that's dangerously close to getting a gun bill that 70% of Georgians say that they're opposed to, and that you've got on your desk. Isn't it true? Have you seen the extensive messages from the faith community in opposition to this initiative?
You know, even though we have some votes in this body that are unanimous, I will tell you that the people of Georgia don't all agree on any issue.
That's right. And the impact of your amendment would include the suppressor language.
That's right.
In Senate Bill 60 as it came from the House to us.
That's correct.
This
This body's passed that language a number of times.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
No further questions, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. President, I ask for your favorable consideration of the amendments. I believe the sponsor for Amendment 1A will speak to that amendment. I am not opposed to that. I ask for your approval of the amendments and for your yes vote on the bill.
Secretary will read the amendments.
Amendment AM 281357. 1A first. AM 41066. Amendment 1A. Senator Williams of the 19th offers the following amendment. Amend the amendment to the House floor. Amendment to the Senate Judiciary Non-Civil Committee. Substitute the House Bill 60 by inserting after line 65 the following, and for the purposes. Amendment 1, AM 281357 by Senator Heath of the 31st. Amend House Floor Amendment to HB 60 by inserting after 83202 on line 3, Part 1 of Article 1 of Chapter 3 of Title 27, and for the purposes. That completes the order, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 19th to speak to his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I can't speak to the underlying bill, but one of the things that has concerned me is the faith community and their position on the gun bill. And what this bill does is it allows for an opt-in on behalf of churches. It also, if you own a permit, down at the end of page 1, if you own a gun permit and you happen to take that gun into a church, then you can't be arrested, but you can be fined up to $100. Any person that doesn't have a gun permit and carries it into a church could be convicted of a misdemeanor and a fine. The last part of the bill, line 35, is something that the airport asks us to put in. Currently, if you go through security and you realize halfway through that you have a gun, then you can't back out of the security. You've got to go all the way through the system and then leave with the gun. And this has been worked out with the airport. the federal law requires you to go all the way through the security system, not to just say, oh, I've got a gun, I'm going to leave. If there's any questions regarding the Senator from 31st deals with suppressor. This deals primarily with an opt-in for churches. Mr. President, no.
You've got a question. Chair recognizes Senator from the 15th for a question. No? Nope. Okay.
Yield the will.
No questions. Chair recognizes Senator from the 30. I'll let you finish your call. 33rd.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, here we are the last 2 days, and this is when it gets very, very dangerous, not only for the votes that we cast, but sometimes for the public in general. I'm very serious about this, and I have been for some time. I was a proud member of the NRA and supported by the NRA for many years, until I voted against a bill that would allow guns in bars, permits to carry to take guns in bars. And of course, they hadn't supported me since, and quite frankly, that's fine with me. There's a limit as to what we are to do as competent here in the General Assembly, especially in the Senate, which is supposed to be the deliberative body. Now, pardon me for using 2 pair of glasses. Y'all can laugh if you want to, but my prescriptions are not ready yet, and as you know, I broke my others. I told you that. Bar, if you look on section 1.5 on page 3, bar means an establishment that is devoted to serving alcoholic beverages for the consumption of guests on the premises and in which the serving of food is only incidental to the consumption of those beverages, including but not limited to taverns, nightclubs, cocktail lounges, and cabarets. Now, I'm going to disclose and admit that I've been in a bar. I've been in a nightclub. Don't know if I've been in a cabaret or not, to be honest with you. I saw a movie about it. People getting ugly down here. Somebody's been talking. What I'm telling you is that it's, in my opinion, just not a good idea. I've got 8 guns. I've got a 40 caliber, a 20 gauge pump shotgun. I've got a 30-06 rifle. I've got an 1873 Winchester, the gun that won the West, and a Civil War saddle pistol, and a couple of long rifles. I know how to use them. I don't shoot often. But let me tell you, I'm not against guns. I truly believe in the Second Amendment, but I'll tell you something. Growing up, I saw things that would happen when people have weapons of any kind. And after they mixed it with spirits and anger followed, people were hurt. I've seen a man shot. I was in the service. I've been around the world. I'll tell you something. It is the stupidest thing we can do. What's the phrase they say? You can cure ignorance, but you can't fix stupid. Well, ladies and gentlemen, to carry a gun and permitted under the law into a bar, other than by a police officer, is stupid. And I just don't understand why, when we finally say, all right, let's let the church opt in or opt out. I agree. But in a bar, it should be common sense. I think I'll go have a drink. Don't forget my gun. If you'll remember, Wyatt Earp got in trouble because he banned guns when he was a sheriff and law enforcement officer from the town that he was overseeing at the time. Made him hang him up at the edge of town. Now, why do you think that was? Because after a cattle drive, a few guys wanted to go to the bar. And after a few hours, they want to shoot their guns. And when you do that, people die. Again, I'm not against guns, but there's some things that are common sense. There's a couple other places in the bill that don't really make sense at all. A few years ago, when we passed the bioterrorism bill, senator from the 1st at the time was Senator Johnson from Savannah. And he and I came to an agreement, as I was floor leader for the governor at that time, came to an agreement on a couple of things, and we were just about to pass the bioterrorism bill. Until a certain senator got up and introduced an amendment. He was an obstetrician who was running for Congress, and came up and added an amendment that the governor could not, in emergency circumstances, stop guns from being sold and trafficked. So what you were doing is, in effect, putting the National Guard at risk. And I'll never forget, he said, you're either for the Second Amendment or against it. Well, you know what? That's just not true. I'm for the Second Amendment. I'm not for carrying guns in bars. A couple other places that worry me a good bit, and I'll try to be brief and get out of here, but we've talked about this a lot, and I know it's going to pass. And I hope that no one's hurt or injured, and that no one's killed in a place that serves alcoholic beverages in addition, rather than the primary function of serving spirits as opposed to food. Now, they make exceptions. I'm trying to find, here it is. On page 24, I'm sorry, that was the bioterrorism thing that I was citing. It's a little earlier in the bill. They make exceptions for certain folks. And I would say that the exceptions aren't clear, and I think it would lend itself to possibly being opening it up to too many people having the permission to carry a gun. In fact, one of them's not even defined. It says a person authorized by. It doesn't say a law enforcement officer or anybody having to do with security. And let me point out one other thing. We have responsibility to pass legislation that makes sense to the general public. And I'll tell you, the general public does not buy this. They don't buy it in houses of worship. They don't buy it being in bars. And you're going to find that out when you look at that sheet, and it has every type of church in two of the faiths, and I'm sure maybe the third, but opposing this type of legislation. Now, it doesn't make any sense at all. I'm afraid we're going to embarrass ourselves. I'm afraid one day it's going to backfire on us. And I'm getting to the point where I believe you could pass anything you want to through this place. I don't understand why. I don't understand why good men and women of good faith and that serve the public would want to do that. And if you're in lockstep with a party, then your party's wrong. And if you don't ever vote against your caucus's position, you're not doing your job. You're not having the courage that, as we talked about today, a reasonable man standard, which has been the law for many years, you're not practicing the courage of your own convictions. And if you're ashamed of a vote, try to remember that one, because it ought to stand out in your mind. And there's some that I can't believe that some folks are not going to be a little bit worried about or carry with them to bed each night and wonder if they did the right thing or the expedient thing at the time.
You have some questions if you want to take
I will. Let me address the amendment, Mr. President.
Okay.
Thank you respectfully. And let me say, I've noticed in the amendment, and I just can't see, I've noticed in the amendment by several senators, which I would almost call the reasonable caucus if it were personally me, with the exception of maybe one. I'll let y'all think about that. But it lists in a courthouse, in a jail, in a prison, and then down there in a bar, unless the owners, and it's struck through. How can you even draw an amendment like that and in good faith think that you're doing the right thing? I'm not an anti-gun. I don't particularly want you to go deer hunting with me if you've got a AK-47, because if you can't kill a deer with less than 40 rounds, I'm not going with you. But I'd suggest that we need to think about what we're doing very seriously and think about public safety. And this flies in the face of that. Ask a state patrolman. Ask how they feel about it when they walk up on cars at 3 o'clock in the morning. I've got a son-in-law who's an FBI agent, and he'll tell you about it. It's like Einstein said, insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. And this is not right, and you know it. So you can go ahead and light that board up with green lights, but I'm not going to join you, and I hope that you change your mind or your heart at some point in the future. I'll yield for questions if there are any, or I'll yield the floor.
Chair recognizes Senator on the 15th.
I do.
Senator Yale.
I do.
Senator, I'm referring to the bill on page 2, line 60, I beg your pardon, line 52, and it deals primarily with housing authorities and the fact that this would require housing authorities not to prohibit guns in those federal reservations, usually those housing areas.
Right.
And I'm just trying to, can you supply me with a reason why someone would want to introduce guns into that environment, although the Supreme Court apparently has ruled that you cannot prohibit tenants from carrying them or owning them in that area?
Well, when it's already federal law, I don't understand, the decision's been made by the courts and the federal government. I don't understand why we add language that conflicts with it. We talked, or repeats it. We talked earlier about that, and I think, quite frankly, that we're in danger of having our laws struck down if we continue to use that process.
Yeah. And isn't it true further, Senator continues to yield, that there are a lot of housing authorities retooling and redeveloping, kind of renaissance of what they are, what they're about with regular marketing housing and mixed in with mixed income, and they're really changing those environments to blend in and become very likable and very doable places to live. Isn't that true?
That's correct, Senator. We've got some in my area and yours in Columbus that are really very pretty places and are being taken well care of, and people are enjoying their neighbors, and the violence is at an all-time low in some of those. If we don't pass the right laws, we're inviting some things to reoccur that we have tried to stop.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator.
Chair recognizes Senator on the 40th.
Senator Yield.
I do.
Senator, I want to refer you to, on the amendment, line 9.
I'm sorry, say it again.
I would like to refer you on the amendment to line 9.
Amendment.
Isn't it true what it says, as acceptance provided in section D or E of this code section, which is in the general bill on line 147, that a license holder shall be authorized to carry a weapon in a government building when the government building is open for business and where ingress in such building is not restricted or screened. So in other words, is it not true that if you don't have security, then you bring a gun in there?
I'm sorry, I don't hear well either. Everything's going bad, but tell me again what you're saying. I can't
What
hear
I'm
you.
saying to you, when you're reading here, there is an exception to the government building. Mm-hmm. If you go to the bill itself on line 147, it says in the bill, that subsection E, a license holder shall be authorized to carry a weapon in a government building when it's open for business and we don't have screening. So the only way, is it not true, to prohibit guns in government buildings is if you put a security service in there. Is that not true?
I'm afraid you're right.
Thank you.
Thank you. One other thing I'll say is that on the provision that you can carry a gun into a house of worship, if somebody's going to carry a gun in a house of worship, I don't think they're going to worry about a $100 fine. To be honest with you, I think probably they've got something, and it can happen by error, but I think you need to be very careful, because if you have a lot of your parishioners doing it, I wouldn't want to be the preacher. But I'll yield the floor and just ask you to exercise some common sense. This is not the law to pass. You probably will, but I tell you that someday it'll bite us. And I wonder sometimes when we're on Saturday Night Live why, and when I read things like this, I know. But I'll yield. Thank
you. Sorry? Chair. What purpose, Senator from the 8th rise?
Move the previous question.
Senator has moved the previous question. Is there objection? There is objection. All those in favor of the previous question being ordered will rise, stand, and be counted. If you're in favor of the previous question being ordered, rise, stand, and be counted. Chair recognizes Senator from the 41st.
President, wouldn't this just afford us a chance to talk about this very important issue a few more minutes if we voted down this motion at this time?
That is correct. Reverse. On the motion, the yeas are 30 and the nays are 16, and the motion for the previous question is passed. Now the question before you is Amendment 1A, authored by the Senator from the 19th, AM 410066. All those in favor, rise, stand, and be counted. No. Reverse. On 1A, the yeas are 38 and the nays are 9, and the amendment has been adopted. Now the question is on Amendment 1 as amended. Is there objection? Without objection, Amendment 1. I understand. Are you? Without objection, 1 as amended is adopted. The senator from the 31st has moved that the Senate agree to the House amendment to the Senate substitute to HB 60. All of those in favor of agreeing to the House amendment to the Senate substitute as amended to HB 60 will vote aye. Those opposed no, and the Secretary will unlock the machine. Chair recognizes Senator from the 18th.
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. President.
State your inquiry.
Mr. President, is what we're doing tonight with this bill not a good example of the upper chamber leading, working together, both parties, not name calling, not calling out members of the other chamber and calling them names and degrading them, but working together for the people in order to come up with the best bill possible in the Senate, the upper chamber?
Senator has made a very valid point. Chair recognizes Senator 33rd. What purpose you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Is it not true that the only way this debate will ever be ended if we go ahead and issue the permits in the delivery room in the first place?
On the motion, the yeas are 37, the nays are 18, and the Senate has agreed to the House amendment to the Senate substitute as amended.